Hey, fourth grade, Miss Trimble here. As the Pennsylvania primary elections are coming up in a week on June 2nd, this week we are going to talk about voting, what it is, what are elections, and the whole voting process. So the first question we need to ask ourselves is, what is voting? Some of us might know already what it is, or some of us have participated in voting. So think about this for a few seconds to yourselves. Voting, in the sense of a noun, means a formal way to give an opinion to fairly decide things. So, for example, in a sentence where I say, "Will you be participating in the voting this year?" That means, will you be participating in the formal way to give your opinion on a decision to be made? Now, voting can be also used as a verb. For example, I vote to have Obama be the President of the United States. Or, I will be voting in the election in June. This is when you are actually doing the formal way to decide something by giving your opinion. Now that you know the definition of voting or vote, have you ever voted on something? Think about it for a few seconds. In reality, you all probably have voted in some form or another to make a decision about something. For example, how many of you have been in a group, maybe at home, to vote on what you would have for dinner? Is it going to be pizza? Is it going to be tacos? Or is it going to be burgers? In the classroom setting, when you guys are working in groups, sometimes you'll vote on who's going to be in charge of writing, who's going to be in charge of coloring, and who's going to be in charge of presenting. One final example from school is when we had Netflix and lunch in Miss Trimble's class. We would vote on which Netflix show we all wanted to watch. We took a vote, and whichever show or movie got the highest number of votes, that's the one we watched. So we all take part in voting pretty much almost every day of our lives. Now, since we are in fourth grade and this is global studies, we need to discuss the political definition of voting, which might be a little more challenging. Political voting is a formal way to choose a person or law into the government. So, when tons of Americans voted for Obama to be president, that's what happened. Tons of people put their opinion of who they want to be in charge in the government during things called elections. So now the next vocabulary term we need to know is, what are elections? An election is a formal system where people vote for a person for a political office. Elections to become president are a pretty big deal because it determines who's going to be in charge of the United States. And that's why they only happen once every 4 years. The last election was in 2016 when it was between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. The one before that was between Barack Obama and John McCain. And the next presidential election is actually coming up this year in 6 months, called the 2020 election. Although we don't yet know who the two candidates will be in this presidential election, it's highly likely it will be somebody from the Democratic Party versus somebody from the Republican Party. Moving on, there are two main types of elections: general elections and primary elections. First, let's talk about general elections. During general elections, people get to vote who they want to be in charge of these positions, such as federal officials, like the president, and congressmen, such as senators and House of Representatives. They also get to decide state officials, such as governors. Also, county and city officials such as mayors, and even judges like district judges, and even amendments to the constitutions. That's right, people can vote on what laws they want to be added to our Constitution. All of these terms should sound familiar to you guys when we did a whole unit on Pennsylvania. Does anybody remember who our state governor is? It is Governor Tom Wolf. Now, who is the Philadelphia mayor? Our mayor is Mayor Jim Kenney. All of these names I just said were people who were voted into these positions by the people in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. Next, let's talk about primary elections. Primary elections are when people vote for candidates for the general election, the type of election we just talked about. Essentially, people who want to be in the general election have to first go through and win the primary elections. Once they win, then they get to move on to the general election. Take a look at the three faces at the bottom. Let's say that each face represents one person who wants to be in the election. Smiley face gets 10 votes. Medium face gets 9 votes. And sad face got 8 votes. So who won from the blue side? The one with the most votes, which is smiley face. What about the orange side? That's right, the same smiley face on the orange side. So that means the smiley faces from each side won and get to move on. Now they move on and run against each other for the general election. Whoever wins this time is the one who gets to actually win the position they're running for, whether it's president, mayor, governor, or judge. Finally, let's move on to the voting process and how it operates. So here are all the steps that usually are involved during a voting process. First, in order to properly participate in the voting process, you need to know what you're voting for. This includes knowing what you believe and what you want in the government, and educating yourself on issues. For example, if you want the government to change something about racism, then you need to study and learn about racism and how it can be solved. Then you would go to step 3 and consider how the candidates running would vote on issues. Would you want to vote for somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about with racism? Or would you want to vote for somebody who knows what they're talking about and has solutions against racism? Since these candidates or people running for these positions are going to hold a lot of responsibility and power in the government, you want to make sure you vote for somebody who reflects your beliefs and your perspectives. You also want to pay attention to the news. Oftentimes, candidates will be on TV with ads or even debates talking about how they believe on certain issues, or talking to the news, being interviewed about what they would do against racism or what they would do with taxes, for example. So in order to really be educated on who you're voting for and what you're going to vote for, pay attention to the news, whether it's the newspaper or TV. Finally, once you have all that down, then comes voting day. Hopefully by voting day, you are ready to express your opinion and make a vote. In order to vote, usually you'll have to go to a polling place, and some of them have paper where you write down who you want to vote for, and some places nowadays have machines where you can click what you want. Now, sometimes if you're out of your state or in a different city and you can't make it to the polling place, then you're allowed to send in your vote via mail by mailing it to the government so that they can count it. As you can see, the voting process takes a long time and a lot of effort. But it's important to put in all this work because it determines who our leaders are going to be. Don't you want somebody in the government who will fight for you and protect your rights and reflect your opinions? You might be wondering, is voting always fair if we sometimes end up with leaders who aren't good leaders? That's a big question that hopefully we can talk about another time. For now, I'm going to wrap up and introduce this week's project, which I'm calling the Presidential Poster Project. For this project, pretend you are running for president. What problems would you fight against? What ideas and laws would you try to pass in the government? Your poster must be powerful so people will vote for you. You might be wondering, well, Miss Trimble, why do I have to put in all this work so that people vote for me? Well, once everybody submits their posters, we're all going to vote on the scholar with the best poster and the best ideas to be our virtual president for the rest of the school year. The scholar who wins virtual presidency will have the amazing opportunity to help lead Harambe and help plan socializations with Miss Trimble and Mr. Lasimba. That's a pretty important job, so we'll be counting on you. Before you get started, here are a few more guidelines for what your poster must include to get a grade. At least one problem you would fight against, at least one solutions to that problem, and at least 3 reasons why people, like the scholars in your grade, should vote for you. To conclude, you are going to use your knowledge and understanding of the voting process from the information from this video to create a presidential campaign poster and participate in a grade-wide election. I am extremely excited about this project, and I hope you are too. I can't wait to see all the creative, fun, and informative ideas you have in mind. If you have any questions, I'll be on office hours for you guys to visit.